and solution tree. For more than 20 years, Solution Tree has collaborated with K-12 schools around the world to raise student achievement and improve staff performance, offering a comprehensive range of educational resources, strategies, and tools for teachers and administrators. Solution Tree is recognized as the premier partner for inspired professional development. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carol Pearson. I'm the Director of Educational Partnerships at Solution Tree. I work with school districts and individual schools to help them in their school improvement efforts. Just a few tips for today's presentation. Use your chat dialog box. It'll be on the right-hand side of your screen. If you want, or if you have technical questions, you can send them to the user named host or Solution Tree. You can also follow the webinar on Twitter. Use hashtag STWebinar to your tweets. You will be placed on mute during the webinar. Type any content-related questions in the chat dialog box and send those questions to the user named host Solution Tree. And then Mike will get to as many of those questions as he can during a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. The webinar recording and handouts will be available for 60 days at the Solution Tree website. You should receive an email with this link within the next 5 business days. Our speaker today is Mike Mattis. You can see his brief biography there on the screen, as well as his contact information. I have heard Mike speak on many occasions to many customers across the country, and people always come away excited and interested in doing all they can to help all students be successful. Okay, Mike, take it away.
Thank you for your very, very precious time. If you were able to join us for the webinar we had last week, certainly we're going to build upon that today. If you weren't able to join us, certainly what we're about to talk about can stand alone, but also know that the first webinar is available for the next 60 days, downloadable from the Solution Tree website. I appreciate them doing that. Let me also thank you for your precious time, too. I know how busy this time of year is for educators, both teachers, site administration, district or county or state or provincial level. So thank you for taking your very, very precious time. We know that Roland Barthes says this: educators and students go hand in hand as learners, or they don't go at all. What we do as educators matters, and the key to us improving what we do for our students is our continued learning. So whenever we have a chance to learn together, get better at what we do, the better we're going to serve our students. So again, taking this precious time out, thank you so much on behalf of both me as well as on the students that you serve. Why are we here? Well, let's remind ourselves. You say, well, we're here to learn about RTI. No, that's the what are we here for, not the why. You know, honestly, the key thing about using tools effectively is using them for the right reason, the right way. And we as educators are here for one critical reason. That's for all kids to learn at high levels. I reminded people last time we were together, schools are here to prepare children to be adults. When we boil down all the mandates and requirements that are put upon our schools and districts, it all boils down to this. We're here to prepare the youth of today for the adult world that they're going to inherit tomorrow. Ask any parent what they want for their own child. I doubt if they'll say this: I just want them to score proficient on our state test each year. No, it's about preparing their kids for life. That's what it's about. I also reminded you last time of this fact. If we're here to prepare children to be adults, what is the reality of the world they're going to inherit? We know that 9 out of 10 jobs that they will be competing for, 9 out of 10 jobs for a chance at the middle class or better, will take more than a high school diploma. So when I say all children, we are here to ensure that they learn at high levels. How do we define high levels? Let's define it this way. High school plus. Of course, every child's going to graduate from high school with the ability to continue to learn beyond high school. Without that, every student that doesn't make it through the K-12 system, they are going to be put in a position in which it is most likely their life will be characterized by a greater chance to live in poverty, be incarcerated, and die young. None of us would want that for our own child, and it should be good enough for any child that attends our schools. What else do we know? If our mission is to ensure high levels of learning for every child, there's no way on God's green earth an individual teacher has all the time, all the skills, all the knowledge to meet the needs of every child assigned to their class or classes. So if we want all kids to learn and all kids learn different ways and learn at different speeds, the only way that we're going to achieve it is if we create a systematic process that guarantees every student receives the additional time and support they need to learn at the highest levels. Systematic. What do I mean by that? Well, here's an easy way to define a systematic intervention program. You know you have a systematic intervention program when you can look any parent in the face whose child attends your school and tell them this. It doesn't matter what teacher your child has at the school. If your child needs extra time and support, we guarantee they're going to get it. Can you make that promise now about your school? Or if you're a district office or a state or regional office, can you say this to any parent whose child attends a school in your district, your region? It doesn't matter what school your child attends or what teacher they have in that school. If your child needs additional time and support, we guarantee they're going to get it. Can you make that promise and mean it? If not, then your school or district doesn't have a systematic intervention system. It has an educational lottery system. Kids succeed in school by luck, by chance, or by hope. I'm a practitioner, y'all. My entire career has been spent at the site level. From my very first day in the classroom, I've always had a guiding principle. I bet you will all agree with it. It's this: what we do in our schools and in our districts should be good enough for our own child. I can't think of anything more immoral than to make decisions as educators that are good enough for someone else's kid. If it was happening to our kid, I wouldn't be satisfied. So if you can't make that systematic process to every parent and mean it, make that promise, guess what? Then what you are providing someone else's child wouldn't be good enough for your own, because you don't want your child to succeed in school by luck, chance, or hope, do you? You want to know that there is guaranteed support if my child needs it. And if that's the case, every child deserves that. So what we talked about in the last webinar is this: how do we create the conditions to make this possible? Because interventions and a successful intervention system doesn't start with interventions. It starts by making sure you have the right school culture, the right school collaborative structures, the right school instructional focus, and the ongoing assessment data needed to be able to have most kids and most teachers succeed in the first place. If you have a lot of kids struggling in your school right now, honestly, you don't have an intervention problem. You have a what you're doing all day problem. So we showed and talked about how the essential questions that drive the professional learning community's work process make the foundation possible for a system of interventions to work. That's what we focused on. What we want to focus on today is this. Now, how do we respond when kids don't get it the first time? Because no matter how well you teach things the first time, no matter how well teachers collaborate across your campus, no matter how well you do formative common assessments, no matter what, some kids are not going to get it the first time you teach it. But if our mission is every child's going to learn at high levels, then we better have a systematic way to respond. Here's the good news. We know how to systematically respond effectively. That's the purpose of response to intervention, also called response to instruction. Some states they call it response to instruction and intervention. Whatever you call it, it comes down to this. RTI, response to intervention, is a scientifically proven way for us to create a systematic process that guarantees every single child the additional time and support they need to be able to learn. Now, I want to caution you at this point here, and that is this. To understand RTI, you better forget everything you know about traditional special ed. Why do I say that? The only systematic process every school in North America has had for the last 40 years to guarantee kids extra help, at least once they qualify, is traditional special ed. Make no mistake about it, traditional special ed is fatally flawed. It is detrimental to basically every child in it right now if our goal is high levels of learning for every child. Now, that's not Mike Matz's opinion. You want stats? I'll give you some pretty scary stats, okay? You would agree if traditional special ed worked, most kids would get out of it. They get redesignated. Most kids in special ed they qualify under mild moderate. They don't have profound disabilities. So if that's the case, we should be closing their achievement gap and catching them up. If that's the case, what's the national redesignation rate in America since 1975 when special ed started? 1.8%. 1.8. Less than 2 out of every 100 kids ever get out. Once you get in, you never get out. It's a death trap. You want more stats? How about this? What's the national graduation rate of special needs kids right now nationwide? 56%. Probably 1 out of 2 earn a high school diploma. We know kids will have to learn beyond high school to compete in the new global marketplace. Once you get in special ed, the high school diploma part's a coin toss, and those kids are woefully underrepresented in post-high school educational opportunities. You want more stats? It's estimated about 5% of the adult population are ex-special needs kids. It's estimated about half the prison population are ex-special needs kids. You want more? What's the lowest achieving subgroup on state standardized tests in all 50 states right now? What subgroup is scoring lowest? Special ed students. And they are by far the lowest achieving group. And it's been that way every year since No Child Left Behind passed. You want more stats? How about this one? It's estimated right now 4 out of 5 kids currently in special ed under the qualification of specific learning disability don't have a disability at all. The problem is they never learned how to read. You want me to keep going? I can give you stats until the hair on the back of your neck go up. I don't care what measure you want to use. It is exceedingly difficult to say once a child qualifies for special ed, they're going to learn at higher levels. They're on track to learn at grade level or better and go on to learn beyond high school. It's the opposite. How could a system get that messed up? Actually, special ed is one of the most successful educational change initiatives in the history of American public education for why it was started. You see, special ed didn't start to help special needs kids learn. It started to allow special needs kids to go to school at all. Let's do a history lesson. Special ed started with Public Law 94-142. Before 1975, where did most special needs kids go to school? Trick question. They didn't. Schools had the right to deny them access. So most of these kids were in institutions. They were in church programs. They were kept at home in closets and in basements, but they weren't in school. And in 1975, the federal government stepped in and said every child has the right to a what? Free and appropriate public education, FAPE. Every child has the right to go to school. Did it work? Perfectly. What would happen in your district, your school right now if you denied a student attendance to your school because the child was disabled? I bet you all chuckle. You would know you'd be sued. You'd make national news for denying one child. Literally, Wolf would be talking about you in the Situation Room tonight on the national news if you did that. If this happened in 1974, no one would have cared. Nobody. Basically this, special ed was a civil rights law. That's what it was. It was the morally right thing to do. But if we wanted those kids to learn, we wouldn't have set up special ed the way that we did it. Why? One teacher can't meet the needs of every child. So we're going to have the most at-risk kids assigned to one case carrier, and we'll make that teacher usually the most isolated teacher in the entire school. That's the best way to meet the most at-risk kids' needs? Really? What's the other problem with traditional special ed? How we qualify kids. Now, physical disabilities are not hard. That's not our call. That's a doctor's diagnosis. The problem is this, learning disabilities. Most kids are in special ed because of a learning disability. How we traditionally qualified kids for a learning disability. The discrepancy model or the wait to fail model. It works like this. You don't get help until you drop far enough behind. How far behind? At least 2 standard deviations or greater. Do you want to know what multiple research studies prove? You let a child drop 2 standard deviations or higher behind, it's nearly impossible to catch them up. So let's put this together. The only systematic process schools have traditionally had to give kids systematic help is special ed. The only way you get it, you have to qualify for it. And how do you qualify for it? You get so far behind we can't catch you up. If the medical field worked like that, you wouldn't get medical treatment until you're terminal. You withhold medical treatment until someone's terminal. It's not health. It's hospice. You're managing the damage is done. What changed all this? Honestly, no child left behind. How? Primarily by accident. We never knew how bad the special ed problem was because many districts and schools exempted special needs kids from taking standardized state tests. We judge kids in special ed traditionally by if the child met their IEP goals, and most students in special ed have IEP goals below grade level. So a child can meet their goals for the year and still end up farther behind from grade level in the process, and we call it a successful year. But when No Child Left Behind passed, we had to test every child, and we started to get a comparison point of those kids to all kids. And what did we find out? They're not learning. So in 2004, when they reauthorized special ed law, the federal government got it right. They said, hey, the discrepancy model isn't working. They turned to research and said what would work, and that went to our RTI. So I want to talk about this up front. Why? Because RTI is the opposite thinking of traditional special ed. So to understand it, you got to forget what you've always learned about special ed. How so? Traditional special ed says this: hey, child, you don't get help until you qualify. You have to get far enough behind. Do you want to know what RTI says? Don't wait for kids to drop behind. At the first sign of trouble, let's respond. Why? It's easier to solve little problems than big problems. Traditional special ed says this: hey, child, you can't get help from anyone. Who do you qualify for? Well, in the reauthorization of special ed law in 2004, the federal government allows us to start to use a percentage of our special ed resources in preventive ways for any child. And we've always been able to serve special needs kids with regular ed resources. In other words, we can start to blur the lines between regular ed and special ed and make it just ed. Allow schools to say this instead: not who do you qualify for, what do you need, child, and who is best trained and able to meet those needs. Traditional special ed, when a kid struggles, what do? We assess the child. Why? The assumption is the child's the problem. RTI, we said, let's assume the child can learn. The child's not the problem. Let's look at ourselves as educators. Are we giving this child the time and support they need to learn at the highest levels? It's the opposite thinking. Now, why have I spent the first 15 minutes talking about this? Because I see so many schools struggle with RTI because they can't get past the legality and the original thinking of traditional special ed. It's such a radical way to think differently about how we've traditionally systematically responded that what do we know? Schools are struggling because they can't get this new way of thinking. Anthony Mohammed, in his outstanding book, Transforming School Culture, says this: if you want someone to do something differently, the first thing people need is a compelling reason why. Show me that what we're doing now isn't working, and show me that there might be a better way. Well, that's what I've tried to do here. I've tried to show you that our traditional special ed system, while it should be honored, it was the morally right thing to do. For why it was started, it was exceedingly successful. It is not the process and the solution to guarantee kids time and support to reach the highest levels of learning. That's not the answer that we need to use now to meet the needs of all kids and systematic interventions. If you're listening with someone else right now, take a quick minute here. Have a quick discussion. Think about this. Have I given you a compelling enough reason that maybe our traditional special ed system isn't the best way to respond to provide all kids extra help to learn at the highest levels today? Have I given you a compelling enough reason that we should rethink the way we systematically respond when kids don't learn? Take a quick minute and think about that. If you are working, listening to this alone, use that chat box and give me a little bit of feedback on what you've heard so far. Or if you're on Twitter, tweet me a quick tweet, okay? One quick minute. Ready? Go. Okay, I'm going to bring you on back here. Someone on the chat box posted a really good question. How do we know when our building is ready for this message? You know, I'll kind of quote that old proverb. You know, when's the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago? When's the second best time? Today. Kids are struggling right now. Your traditional school system isn't, or traditional special ed system isn't meeting their needs right now. So the best time to have had this conversation would have been before this point. But if not, the second best time is now, right now, as soon as possible. Kids are failing right now. That's an excellent question, and I appreciate the people that posted it. Okay, let's jump into this thing. Now, so how do we build a system of interventions? When people learn about RTI, the shape that they're taught is the shape of a pyramid. That pyramid is a blessing and a curse. Blessing. It's just meant to be a graphic representation of what a system of interventions looks like. It's to guide our thinking, okay? Curse. When they made RTI part of the reauthorization of special ed law, some schools, districts, and states are viewing RTI more as just a new way to qualify kids for special ed. And what they usually do is above where it says Tier 3, they put a line. On top it says special ed, and the tiers become the new hoops you have to jump through to just get kids into traditional special ed. And when you think about it that way, one, you're missing the true purpose and power of RTI. We're not doing to get kids into special ed. We're doing to give kids what they need, because if they get what they need, we won't have to worry about special ed later. But two, if you see it as just a screening process to special ed, you end up making RTI to protocol-driven, paperwork-driven. It's almost like running little IEPs on every student. And what ends up happening is your teachers spend more time filling out forms than helping kids. And so why do we use the pyramid at all? This is why. You ready? To guide our thinking. The bottom of the pyramid is fat. Why is it fat? That's what all of your kids need. What do all of your kids need at your school? All kids need access to essential grade level standards. If you had if you're taking notes right now, I can't make this point strong enough. This is what all kids need at Tier 1. Access to essential grade level standards. Why is that? Teachers out there, you know why. Let me ask you a question. Hey, teachers, why do you hate it when kids are pulled out of your class to get extra help? Yeah, that's right. They miss stuff. You understand if you pull kids out of essential grade level standards to get remedial help on skills they should have already learned, they never catch up. Because while they're getting help on the prior skill, they miss the new essential skill. That's one step forward, one step back. Honestly, it's just tracking. That's all it is. If you want to close an achievement gap for a child, kids don't need access to grade level curriculum or remediation. They need access to grade level curriculum and what? And remediation. To use RTI language, they need Tier 1 or core program and interventions, not or interventions. Now, notice what I said here. I didn't say you never pull kids from any core instruction. If you have kids who are significantly behind and they're going to need intensive extra help to get caught up on prior skills, you know, you can't just offer that before and after school. You can't make a kid stay before after school, and you can't have your teachers off and work before after school, and we're all broke to pay for extra people after school anyway. We got to embed it in the school day. But here's the catch. If it's going to be during the school day, kids have to miss something. What can they miss? Well, we talked about this last week. Would you agree in our curriculum there are nice-to-know things and there are got-to-know things? There are things if a child doesn't learn it this year, it won't kill him. But there are some things, if a child doesn't learn it this year, we've compromised their future next year and beyond. Well, we better identify what those got-to-know or those essential things are. Kids can't miss the grade level essentials. They can miss nice-to-knows. They can't miss got-to-knows. So think about this for a quick second here. Take one more minute, a quick conversation with the person next to you. In your school right now, or if you're a district person in your district, do all students have access to essential grade level standards? Or do you have tracks of learning below grade level, where some kids are basically taught all day remedial learning outcomes? Because if so, those kids will never catch up. If you teach a child below grade level all day, guess where they will end up? Below grade level, of course. They can't learn at high levels if they're not taught at high levels. You can't learn at grade level if you're not taught at some point during the day at grade level. So do all kids have access to essential grade level standards? Take a quick minute and chat about that. And then we'll come on back. Go. Okay, I'm going to bring it back here now. Let's bring it back here in 5 and 4, 3 and 2, 1, and thank you. So tier 1 is fat. It represents what all of your kids get, what all of your kids need, access to essential grade level standards and effective initial teaching. And if we do it right, most of our kids should make it there. Mike, about how many kids? As a guideline, we'd like to see at least 3/4 or more of your kids be making it right there. But no matter how well you teach it the first time, some kids won't get it. So our first level of interventions we call tier 2 or supplemental help. It's some help. Mike, how long is it? It's some help. But Mike, how many weeks is it? It's some help. You see, that's the problem. We will visit some districts and they'll say, well, in our district, tier 2 is 6 weeks long. Here's my question. Why? Why is it 6 weeks long? Teachers, you ever worked with a kid one-on-one for about 30 minutes and they got it, and then that little bit of extra help, they got the concept? Well, would you make that kid sit in that same intervention for 5.5 more weeks because you predetermined tier 2 is 6 weeks long? Why? Would you discontinue what's working after 6 weeks because, the child's catching up, they're not quite there yet, but we'll stop it because we predetermined they can only be in it for 6 weeks? Stupid. Now, why would a district do that? If you see the pyramid as a new way to qualify kids for special ed, you'd ask this question. How long do we got to try this tier before we can move kids closer to special ed testing? That'd be protocol-driven, not we're doing this for the needs of kids. Here's what I want you to think about tier 2, okay? I'll teach it with an analogy, okay? Because you're saying, well, Mike, that's kind of a wishy-washy. It's some help. No, it's not. Think about it this way. Medically speaking, sometimes I get a headache. I just need some aspirin, okay? I don't need to sit in the hospital. I don't need 911 to be called. I just need some aspirin. In 30 minutes, I'm feeling better. A few weeks ago, I got a cold, and I was traveling so much that I didn't rest enough, and it became bronchitis. So the doctor gave me an antibiotic to take for a week. For a week, I got some extra medical treatment. I didn't sit in the hospital for a week. I just needed a little bit of extra help for about a week. When I was in high school, I was on the basketball team, and I fell and broke my wrist. I wore a cast for 3 months. I didn't sit in the hospital for 3 months, but for 3 months, I needed a little extra medical treatment. Notice that it varied from a half an hour of aspirin to 3 months of cast. But no one would mistake that for intensive medical treatment. You see, that's what tier 2 is. It's a little bit of extra help. It's going to vary from kid to kid how long it needs to be. It's going to vary what it is. Some kids need just a little extra reteach, and they got the concept. Some kids need a swift kick in the behind to get started working because they lack the motivation to try. Some kids have poor attendance and need some attendance support. Some kids have some behaviors that make them distracted in class that hurt their learning process. It's going to vary from kid to kid what it is. Tier 2 represents a little help, and it tapers in above tier 1. Why? Because if tier 1 worked, not every kid needs tier 2, hence the tapered shape coming in. Now, we know some kids from time to time will need a little help. The catch is some kids at your school need a lot of help, don't they? They're not a little behind, they're a ton behind. And why is that? Because, often no fault to you, they always haven't had the support at home or the prior experiences, so they enter your school significantly behind. They're going to need a lot of help. That's tier 3, intensive help. What is intensive help? Mike, it's a lot of help. Mike, how long is it? I'll do the same analogy. Ready? Tier 3. This isn't aspirin. It's not a cast. It's not a amoxicillin. These are kids that are educationally hemorrhaging. If someone was hemorrhaging in your school, you wouldn't give them aspirin. You would call 911. You'd get them to the hospital right now. They would have ongoing care. It's that serious. Mike, how long is it? Well, it matters. It matters the illness. Medically speaking, I could rupture my appendix tonight. The odds are I'd be in surgery tonight, pretty intensive. The odds are also I'd be back at work within 3 weeks. I could go out and play basketball tonight for some exercise, blow out my knee, be in surgery within a week, and have 9 weeks of intensive rehab. You wouldn't mistake that for a cast, would you? But the need, I would need it longer for that. Now it tapers in again. Why? Because not every child's going to need Tier 3. Why? Because Tier 1 and Tier 2 work for even more kids, hence the tapered shape. As you go up the pyramid, the interventions are becoming more intensive, more targeted, more focused on individual kids, but fewer and fewer kids need it. Now people ask me, Mike, where does special ed fit into the pyramid? Here's the answer. Yes. The answer is yes. We are allowed to start to use those resources anywhere throughout the tiers. I think one of the great misperceptions in RTI right now is this. People who say Tier 1 and Tier 2 is regular ed, Tier 3 is special ed. That's misguided thinking. The directors of special ed for our nation, the Association of Special Ed Directors, wrote a position paper a few years back. They said one of the great misperceptions of RTI is Tier 3 is special ed. No, it is what kids need. Now, Mike, give us an example. Sure. See, the way the pyramid is implemented at a site has to look different. There has to be some freedom about it. It's just guiding your thinking. Example, the first school I was principal at, 3/4 of the kids were English language learners. When 3/4 of your kids need something, what tier do you think you put the support into to start with? Well, Tier 1. Yeah, Tier 1. Why? Are you really going to send 3/4 of your kids out to get extra help? Does that make sense? When 3/4 of your kids need something, you embed it in your core instruction. We built in a 30-minute block of time every day where kids got English language development direct instruction based upon where their English language level was. Actually, the kids who were sent for interventions during that time were the English-only students who already had mastered those skills. They got extension during that time. The last school I was principal at, about 8% of the kids were English language learners. Do you think we stopped for 30 minutes a day for all students in core instruction to get EL help when only 8 out of every 100 kids needed it? No. But we still had 8% of our kids that needed it, so we built that support into Tier 2 and Tier 3. The pyramid's guiding our thinking, but it's looking different from school to school. Let me give another example. Last school I was at as principal, Pioneer Middle School, we knew every year we had some 6th graders come in because we were a 6, 7, 8 middle school. We had some 6th graders move in or come to our school each year, and they were significantly below in the critical skill of reading. Okay? They weren't a little behind. They were way behind in reading, multiple years behind. Now, we knew they would need intensive help then. We're not going to catch them up with a little bit of reading help. So we wanted those kids to be in an intensive reading program, but we didn't want to take them out of their regular language arts class. Why? If you put them in a remedial reading class, yes, you'll catch them up in reading as they miss all the other essential standards being taught in their regular grade level course. So we wanted kids to have grade level curriculum in Tier 1 and intensive reading help. So we made that possible. The kids had a regular language arts class, and they had an intensive reading support class later within their day. Now, who taught that class, regular ed or special ed teacher? Well, we asked this. Who's the best reading teacher in our school? In the medical field, the more sick you are, the more highly trained person you go see. And we want the same thing in education. So we looked at our staff and said, who's the best reading teacher? The best reading teacher we had was a regular ed teacher. She had a master's degree in reading specialist credential, was our district teacher of the year. We made her schedule so she still taught 4 regular language arts classes each day, but twice a day she taught an intensive reading class. Who was in that class, regular or special ed kids? Yes. We never asked the question. Where I look at a child with an IEP and say, oh, you need the same reading help? Get that from your special ed teacher. We had 2 very good special ed teachers at our school, but neither of them had a master's degree in reading or a reading specialist credential. They were good reading teachers. We wanted specialists. Let's flip it. What's the best reading teacher was a special ed teacher in our school? Well, we're allowed to start to blur the lines and use some of our special ed resources in preventive ways for any child now. So I'd still put those kids in any kid in that class that needed it. Would I really look at a child and say, I got a great reading class for you, perfect for what you need? Oh, it's taught by a special ed teacher. You don't qualify. Can you fail for 1 more year? Can you get a bigger discrepancy first? That'll be too late by the time the help comes, but sorry. That's how we think about the pyramid. Because so many schools and districts are viewing the pyramid as just a new way to qualify kids for special ed. In our new book, Simplifying Response to Intervention, we wanted to change the thinking. So we actually proposed maybe a better way to look at the pyramids like that. RTI is about what you can do for each child. It's about what the collective knowledge and resources of your staff can do for the individual needs of each child. It's about focusing what you collectively do on the individual needs of kids. And maybe this picture captures that thinking better than a traditional picture, which is being seen as just a new way to march kids up to special ed. Maybe that's a better way to view it. Now, we do one more thing with this pyramid as we think about it in our brand new book, and that is this. There's another problem we see nationwide on the implementation of RTI, and that is when you start to build a school-wide system of interventions, what ends up happening is this. Sometimes your regular ed classroom teachers start to think this way. Okay, I'm supposed to teach Tier 1, and when kids don't get it, who do I send the kids to? Well, you can't send every kid to somebody else, you know? We don't have unlimited intervention resources that somehow your regular ed teachers just teach it the first time and then want to send every child to somewhere else. That's misguided thinking. Because of this problem, some districts are creating an opposite response, which is equally a problem, and that is this. Their thinking is, well, classroom teachers, you're the first level of Tier 2. You're the first level of intervention. So before you can refer a student to our school-wide system, this is what you have to do. Prove to us what you've done in your classroom first. Here's our district form of all the interventions you must try first and document. And until you do that, forget it. Forget sending any kid to our school-wide system. What's the problem with that? One teacher can't meet the needs of every child alone. You know, think about it. I might be an Algebra 1 teacher. I'm not trying to pass the buck. I have an important essential standard that I just got done teaching in Tier 1. Let's say it's multiplying exponents. I taught it pretty well the first time. Almost all my kids got it. But 7 kids didn't. If you tell me, well, I need to respond to those kids' needs first, here's my problem as a classroom teacher. The first student in my class who can't multiply exponents just doesn't get the way that I taught it. The second kid, they can't multiply. They're multiple years behind in a critical skill. The third kid's never here. That's the problem. They're absent all the time. They could learn if they were here. Kid number 4, no hablo inglés. They don't know what I'm saying. Kid number 5, flat lazy, won't try. Homework is to reinforce what you learned in school. They got it in class. I did a check for understanding, but they didn't go home and practice it. It never went from short-term memory to long-term memory. By the time the end of unit test came, they forgot how to do it. So they need to practice. Kid number 6 is a huge behavior problem. They can't learn it because they can't stay behaved long enough in class. And kid number 7, they were with me when I was teaching multiplying exponents in a Tier 1. They were with me on step 1, with me on step 2, and then a bird just chirped. Someone just coughed. Step 4. You're going to tell me one teacher is going to teach a standard a different way while they teach a critical skill you should have learned years ago, while they, contact a parent and fix an attendance problem, while they While they teach the English language to a kid that doesn't understand it, while they While they make a lazy kid get to work, while they deal with a severe behavior problem and fix it, while they keep a distractible kid focused. There's no way one teacher's doing that. There's no way even the algebra team working as a PLC can do that. They're not trained in half those things. So what's the solution? Here's what we propose. You ready? Not only do we recommend that visibly we invert the pyramid to be focused on the needs of kids, but we split the pyramid into two kinds of responsibilities: interventions led by your collaborative teacher teams, interventions led by your school-wide intervention system using your school-wide resources. Now, they're not mutually exclusive. The split here is about talking about who's going to take lead responsibility. So let's think about this green side here. What should teacher teams? Now, these are our PLC teams. We form these teams around teachers that share common learning outcomes, which our third grade team, our Algebra 1 team, our biology team, our seventh grade language arts team. What should they be held responsible for at Tier 1 and at Tier 2? Well, let's think about what we're having them do in the PLC process. They're asking these critical questions. What do we expect kids to learn? How do we know if they've learned it? How we respond when kids don't? How we respond when kids do? And as they do that, they are doing what? They're identifying the essential standards for their course, their subject, their grade level. They're providing the initial instruction. They're doing the common formative assessments along the way of who's learning those standards and who's not. So they're going to be the best people, Tier 1 to Tier 2, to identify which kids are getting and which kids aren't. So these team responsibilities are, at Tier 1, to define the essential outcome, to provide the initial instruction, to provide the ongoing form of assessment, and to identify kids from Tier 1 to Tier 2 that needs help. But what will they take responsibility for interventions at Tier 2? Shouldn't it be the reteaching of their essential standards? I mean, doesn't that make sense? They were the people that identified the essential standards for that course. That's what they're teaming about each week. No one knows the standards better than they do. They're credentialed in the subject. That's what they team about. They gave the common assessment. They know which kids learned and which kids didn't. They have the kids in class. They have the relationship with them. Think about it this way, too. Who are the best people on your campus to help kids struggling in Algebra 1? Wouldn't it be Algebra 1 teachers? I mean, does that make sense? Why would you send those kids to someone else when – now we're talking about the team responding, okay? And we're talking about this too, okay? We're not saying they alone are responsible for it. Can school-wide resources, things like instructional aids and support staff, help them? Sure. We're talking about this. Who's going to take the lead? Who's going to take lead responsibility for the teaching and reteaching of essential grade level standards? It's going to be those collaborative teacher teams that teach that course or subject, of course. That's who. Now, if those collaborative teacher teams are taking the lead for the teaching and the reteaching of their grade level curriculum, why should some of those teachers be allowed to instantly send a kid at Tier 2 to your school-wide system of intervention? Well, let's think about why kids struggle, and what I mean by school-wide resources. Most schools have resources that are shared across the school. People like your school counselor, psychologist, speech and language path, special ed teachers, librarian, health services, classified staff, instructional aides. They're not owned by one grade level or one department. They're shared to support all kids. So when I say coordinating your school-wide system, it's how do you use those other supports? And for that school-wide system at Tier 2, what should be referred to these kind of people to take the lead in interventions? Well, let's think about it here. There's some reasons why kids struggle that aren't related to skill, I don't know how. It relates to will. It relates to the motivation to try, the attendance of just being there, and or the ability to behave long enough to be there. Do you really want your third grade collaborative teacher team to spend their intervention time with kids who know how to do it but choose not to? Does it take a highly qualified teacher to say, get to work, get to work, get to work, let's show some effort? No, we can use an instructional aide, an administrator, support staff member for that. Let's free the third grade teachers up to do what? Teach. Teach what? Third grade standards. They're the best people trained in that in your entire school. They don't need to do the let's motivate kids part as much. We're not saying teachers might not be part of the solution. Who's going to take the lead on that? What if it's an attendance problem? You want your Algebra 1 team chasing down attendance problems? Really? That's what you want them to spend their time with? It'd be better if they spent their time what? Teaching algebra? And what? Collaborating about teaching algebra? Getting better at teaching algebra? Then what? Teaching algebra some more. You have an attendance clerk, a counselor, an assistant principal, a principal. They can take the lead on solving attendance problems. Not that teachers wouldn't be part of the solution. Who's going to take the lead? Who will say, hey, the buck stops with me, with us, when it's this kind of problem? Or what if it's a behavior problem? Not an individual behavior problem for an individual teacher. We're talking about the child who systemically across the school day is demonstrating behaviors that trip them up in learning. The odds are your algebra team are not behavior experts, nor is your third grade teachers. You do have experts on campus. Your school psychologist is trained in behavior plans. Your school counselor has training. Administration also often has training. Let's have them take the lead. Now, if your collaborative teacher teams are taking responsibility for the reteaching and teaching of their essential standards, and at Tier 2, your school-wide resources are taking the lead for motivation, attendance, and behavior-related issues, now it's not all falling on one or not all falling on the other. Now we're clear. Because, see, the catch is this. When everyone's in charge of interventions, nobody is. So you've got to be clear on who's responsible for what. We think that thinking about this way makes it more doable for both your teacher teams, so they're not saying who do I send every child to when they struggle in Tier 1? And we're also not making it so that, every intervention goes to someone else. Now we're clear who's responsible for what. One last point here. What about Tier 3, Mike? Well, you notice it's all red. We're not saying your regular ed teachers don't help in Tier 3. We're saying who's going to take the lead. Why is it all red then? Why is it all guided by your school-wide resources? Because I'll ask you this question. Would you agree with this? Your most at-risk kids never have just one problem. They often have multiple needs. They're weak in foundational skills of learning, significantly weak in reading, writing, number sense, and or English language, often have attendance issues. Often these struggles can create behavior or motivational concerns or combinations thereof. There is no one program you buy in which, if a child's weak in EL and behavior and reading, there is no reading, EL, behavior program you put a child into. It's going to take multiple solutions. That will take coordinating multiple school-wide resources. This is where we recommend that you have a school-wide intervention team, okay? A team of experts that are experts on the reasons why kids struggle. Who might be on that team? School principal, counselor, school psychologist, speech and language path, nurse, special ed teacher, EL teacher, reading specialist, or people at your school. You might not have those exact roles or titles, but you have people trained in those areas. Most schools have a team like this. It's your student study team, your student success team. Let's be honest. In most schools and districts, that team is just a hoop group to jump through to get kids into special ed testing. Now, it wasn't started for that purpose. It was started to be a quality problem-solving group. What's a better way to brainstorm solutions, an individual or a team of people? A team. That's why Tier 1 to Tier 2, we want our teacher collaborative teams to drive the process. You're going from individual teachers trying to brainstorm solutions to a team of people. But what's a better way to brainstorm solutions? A team of people all trained the same way or a team of people with different expertise? Different expertise. Our collaborative teacher teams are formed around teachers usually with the same training, like an Algebra 1 team. Well, they'll be great at solving solutions for kids struggling in algebra or math. They won't be very good on brainstorming solutions on kids who have an English language problem, a health-related issue, a behavior issue. So this intervention team, they're made up on all the reasons why kids struggle, why they can look at the problem from different perspectives to brainstorm better solutions. But two, the other thing that they can do is you can coordinate different solutions. If a kid's struggling with a health issue and in reading, we have our school nurse and a reading specialist there. But they're EL too. Fine, we have a well-trained person in EL also. But they're having some problems socially at school. Our counselor's here. We can coordinate multiple solutions. So here's the key thing. That team, you might repurpose your school student study team, but have them driven more not by district paperwork and forms, but instead by truly problem-solving what kids need. And I'd recommend this team have standing meetings weekly. Because often schools, some of these people are not even on campus every day. So what ends up happening is this. We end up having to call meetings as needed. Well, how many days and weeks does it take to get all those people free? Weeks? If we set a standing meeting each week, then all of a sudden those people are always together. And you have the ability then to continually touch base on your most at-risk kids. They're taking the lead there. We think if we rethink the pyramid that way, we can really start to get powerful on how we respond. Okay, I went about 5 or 4 minutes over what I wanted to when it comes to my direct instruction part. I want to leave some time for questions. So, Carol, let me turn things over to you. And why don't you share some of the questions that our participants have asked?
Sorry, I think I was on mute. Okay, Mike, we do have several questions. Initially, when you were sharing the information about special ed and some of the data related to it, we had several people who posted questions about that. One that I thought was interesting is wanting to know how special ed professionals respond to this information when you have shared it with them before.
Well, I think I think the key thing is this. I saw a question that you might be talking about, how would I as a special ed teacher share with parents that special ed is a death sentence? Well, I think the key thing is this. We've got to rethink the way we do special ed. If we start to write students IEP goals so that they are at grade level or at grade level at least, we got past individual case carers responsible for those kids and how we can collectively respond, then I don't think we need to tell parents it's a death sentence. It isn't if we started to apply the principles of RTI to how we respond when kids need extra help instead of our traditional special ed system. And again, the good thing is the law's on our side now. They made RTI as an option when they made it part of the reauthorization of special ed law in 2004. Often, special ed teachers, they were in schools, they were trying to do the right things for kids, and often they had to kind of bend the special ed rules and not quite admit it, kind of stay under the radar because they knew what they were doing wasn't working, so we would do what's best for kids and just kind of, well, now the law's on our side. So if we start to rethink what we do, we shouldn't be in a position of telling parents, hey, your child in special ed, the statistics are they're not going to graduate from high school. They're going to drop farther and farther behind from grade level. That's just the system, sorry. No, we can start to change this. We can. In fact, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of schools and districts that have already started this journey and are getting phenomenal results with all kids. And when you see the stats on special ed kids, just from my past school alone, the last 2 years I was principal at Pioneer Middle School, 1,500 kids. Guess how many initial IEPs we have? 2. Because most kids aren't broken. It's us doing the right things. How many kids do we redesignate out? Almost half of our kids over a couple of years. Because if we start to do this right, we can use this process to meet the needs of kids.
Thank you, Mike. Another question is, how do you change a culture that believes that remediation is the key to student success and has students being taught below grade level for the majority of the day?
How? There are 2 kinds of research that we can use to help convince colleagues to think differently. Research and evidence. So research. What research do we have that our traditional system of putting kids in remedial coursework as their core instruction, what evidence do we have that it's not working? I recommend go to the book Visible Learning by John Hattie, Hattie, most comprehensive study of what works in schools in the history of mankind. A meta-study of over 50,000 individual studies represents the student achievement of over 81 million students. He does a study on basically what is tracking. What happens when you put kids in core instruction that's below grade level? The thinking is they're below, they can't make it in grade level curriculum, so let's teach them to where they're at. We'll put them in remedial coursework. His meta-study of all the research out there says this. If you look at tracking, the high kids stay high, the middle kids stay in the middle, and the low kids stay low. If you want all kids to learn at high levels, kids must have access to both grade level and remediation, not or. Now, if someone doesn't want to follow that research, say, oh, well, you can make research prove anything. We also can use evidence-based research. In other words, what's working at your school right now? Take a look at the kids who are in special ed or who are in remedial coursework. Do you see those kids catching up? Do you see achievement gaps closing? Do you see those kids, the longer that they are in those remedial programs, you're closing gaps, they're getting closer and closer to grade level, they're graduating at higher and higher levels, they're going on to college and beyond? You won't. The odds are you won't. So there's no evidence in our profession that it can work. No evidence that currently is working in your school or your district right now. Then how can we as professionals continue those practices? How can we say, well, regardless of all that evidence, I just don't think these kids can do it and they really need to be in remedial classes. Get them out of my core class and they should be in a remedial class somewhere. We can't, as professionals, perpetuate what there is no evidence to prove. So if we go to our colleagues with that evidence, we can start to convince them otherwise. Let's have a truly professional conversation. We're not going to argue opinions. The definition of a professional is not that you get to do whatever you want. The definition of a professional is there's a base of research and evidence we're supposed to know and follow. It's why we go through a credentialing process to become a teacher and why we have to be renewed every so many years to show we're keeping up with the research and evidence in our profession. If that's the case, we're not going to argue opinions here. Let's look at the evidence. The evidence is abundantly clear. All kids must have access to grade level expectations.
Okay, Mike. Gosh, we have several more questions, but I will just pick one more for you to address, and that is, if kids are 2 to 3 grade levels below in reading, how can we expect them to keep up in the regular classroom? Don't they need special direct instruction more than what regular ed and interventions can offer?
Well, I understand the question, and I'm going to answer it, but I'll flip it. If there are teachers who say, well, we don't think these kids can do it, problem number one is that assumption means they probably can't do it. Why? Because the adults in the building have already decided that they can't. So that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Step one is a belief that if we do the right kinds of things, kids can achieve. Now, that being said, you say, Mike, you have a child in a, let's say, a 6th grade reading class. Let's say the example I used. You have students in a 6th grade regular language arts class, and they're at a pre-primer reading level. How could they possibly make it in that 6th grade class? Well, I will flip this to you. Some of the essential standards we taught in 5th grade language arts at our school was the skill of inference. Can a child learn to infer who can't read at grade level? Sure they can. We can read a short story together to teach that higher level thinking skill. We can give them the passage on tape to follow along. We can give them the story at their recreational reading level to infer. But the problem is if you take the child out of the regular language arts class where we're trying to teach the skill of inference and you put them in a remedial reading class working on pre-primer reading, yes, you will catch them up on their pre-primer reading skills as they miss grade level inference. So they're going to go on to 7th grade, yes, a little better in reading, but way behind on all those other skills. We can do it if we focus on what those essential things are. The second thing, too, is you say, well, how will they make it with one teacher? At Pioneer Middle School, law school I was principal of, you don't have to teach your core instruction the same way to all kids. Let me give you an example of that. In California, our required class grade level for math is Algebra 1. Some of our teachers worried, well, some kids won't make it in an Algebra 1 class. They're not quite ready for it. And the concern in many ways was valid, considering our average Algebra 1 class had about 37 kids in it, and most teachers with 37 kids in a one-period class couldn't pull that off of meeting those kids' needs. So what did our school do? Well, we, over time, developed 5 different ways to teach Algebra 1. Same essential standards, same common assessments, same level of rigor. It's different how we got kids there, from a one-period class to a 2-period class to a team-taught class with regular ed and special ed for kids who had high levels of distractibility. We also built in a flexible block of time into our schedule every week, a 30-minute block of time, twice a week, to give kids supplemental help based upon what they needed. That means we can do an extra hour of instruction built in throughout the week for kids who needed that help. Then finally, for the kids who were still intensely behind, yes, they still couldn't multiply and they were in algebra. Well, they got to learn how to multiply. You still got to teach the remedial skills. Don't get me wrong. We've got to teach those remedial skills, just not in place of core instruction. So we built in those kids' schedule also a remedial math class. It wasn't either. It was both. So we can make this happen, and I understand the question totally. But the catch is this. If we start with the attitude these kids can't do it, then of course they won't be able to do it. We say they're smart enough to do it if we provide the right supports in place, and maybe our traditional one-period class structure might not be it. By the way, one last point on that, too. Please understand, we got no additional resources from our school district for extra classes. It was reshuffling how we used resources, reprioritizing how we used resources, instead of expecting other resources to come in. So, you know, in California, I mean, we're 49 out of 50 in per pupil spending. So if we can pull it off in our environment, I'm pretty confident it'd be very hard for any school to say, well, that sounds great, Mike, but how can we do it without extra resources? It's being done all over. Excellent question. Thank you.
Mike, thank you so much. We had lots and lots of questions that we didn't get to today. Really, all I can say is if people have more questions, they can certainly find answers in your books and your DVDs that we've got up on the screen right now. And, of course, you are going to be hosting, along with your co-authors, Simplifying Response to Intervention institutes in Seattle, Sacramento, Dallas, and Boston, beginning this summer and going through the fall. Additional resources, you can see there the customer service phone number, the phone number for the professional development department, as well as our website. So that should give you information that you would like. Again, I had a few people ask about recording of the webinar. The webinar has been recorded, and in the next few days it will be up on the website so that you can listen to it with colleagues who perhaps missed the original, today's original event. I just wanted to thank Mike again for an excellent learning opportunity, and I wanted to thank all of you out there for participating.
Thanks, y'all.